Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right, so this past weekend, I was spending some time doing some editing on my recent podcast video I did with two of my good friends, which I'll be posting at some point. At the time of the recording of this, it should be hopefully by the time this one's published. Shortly after, I'll post the video podcast. And so I was making some edits to it, and I spent a good chunk of time, especially on Sunday. And as I was in that process, and then interestingly enough, funny enough, one of the topics that was coming up when I was editing talked a lot about perfection, which in today's episode I want to take a little stab at here. I want to take on an angle at perfection. And so to kind of start it off, personally, I think the idea of perfection, at least what the common collective seems to perceive, you could say societal expectations and such, it comes off as like, it seems to be represents as this thing that's like perfection is at least how I see it, perfection is the antithesis of life. And that is to say that it is a stark contrast to what life is actually all about, what it's meant to be. And there are a lot of factors here, like kind of touching on what I think what life's meant to be. One example of my personal take on like perfection, when I can get kind of caught in this idea of perfection, or at least having some skewed idea of it, goes to right and wrong, or like mistakes in or doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing. And I feel like a lot of people in the online spaces and people share a lot of their opinions about what's right, what's wrong, and things like that. And perhaps maybe some people are projecting their own ideas of perfection and what that looks like. I mean, I'm not even myself. Again, this episode is kind of sharing my perspective, so on that. And what part of what I think life's all about here on this planet is to be involved. And part of what that looks like and what that requires is taking some action, which have consequences, and really being considerate of the consequences, but not let the what ifs consequences, the ideas and stuff, prevent us from taking action, prevent me from taking action. To kind of tie it in for myself more here, this affects me a lot currently, and I feel like it will continue to be, it will be like an ongoing thing as a content creator. And even more so, taking it more simply, or even when I communicate with people, the idea of perfection can really, how can I put it? It can suffocate my communication. It can kind of compress it rather than expand. Whereas I may communicate with unclear motives because of just saying what I think the other person wants to say in order to be accepted, respected, and things like that, and not really honoring, okay, how is it that I truly feel deeply inside, and communicate that as honestly and respectfully as possible. And so, where perfection can get me is I can have a sense to share something, I feel inspired or something, and the perfection that perhaps for me is like a part of it is like programming. That's because for me, I remember growing up. I remember something that affects me in this avenue here in communication. I was very talkative growing up in elementary school. I used to love to chit chat. I was very social, talking to my friends in school and in classes. And oftentimes I would be disruptive to the teacher in the teacher's eyes. And so whenever parent teacher conferences come around, of course, they would tell me about like he's doing well and all this, but then this, and that. And then those occasions had warranted, I guess, according to like my parents, particularly my dad's eyes, a beating, getting physically punished and things like that for being disruptive and all this stuff. So that's definitely one factor. And I think where I want to introduce this idea of like perfection, and then there's this element of fear. Whereas, like, why I'm bringing these up is because it really they can be the big obstacles for me, at least speaking for myself, of living my best life, you know, and these thoughts and ideas and these conversations that I can have, a lot of them that can be not so constructive. But I also want to echo, but I do have just as much, many more constructive thoughts. But just for a moment, spotlighting the not so constructive thoughts. If I start entertaining these thoughts, kind of getting caught up in them, I mean, all that will do is I'll get stuck in this analysis paralysis, kind of looping around in my own head, and I won't take action on something that I know, or just like looking at it from the outside in, at least, looking from the perspective of what my guidance can see, my spiritual helpers, my spirit guides, what they see, it's just these not so constructive thoughts can just be very paralyzing, you know, um, because there's this, around communication, there's like this concern about what are people going to think of me, and I feel like that's the very common experience, a worry, a concern, a fear, even, and I will admit I have some of that, and I'm working through that again, especially as a content creator, and when it comes to sharing with strangers, and even a lot with friends and family, you know, people that don't necessarily know me well enough, and it's just like, I'm sharing, showing them this part of me, this who I am and what I'm about. And it's just like there's no I don't know, it's just for me, I'm just thinking about like, okay, if I'm worried so much, it's like everybody has free will. People have a right to think whatever they want. It's just like, I mean, even like I wouldn't even want to be in the perfect world where people just say yes, 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 um or every single person I meet would be supporting me, although that would be great, right? In this case, I mean, it would be, it's nice and it helps a lot. But I'm thinking about just how much, like, even though I'm going through this challenge right now of just like being able to communicate with people and just working through that, I think that's the point. Like that part right there, that's the I would consider the ugly. That's part of my own growth process and part of my journey, part of my success. You know, some even like I'll even say like success is not perfect. It's a mixture of everything. It has its great, it has its bad moments, it has its ugly, like cringy moments. It's a mixture of everything. But what makes it successful is that sense of fulfillment. Is that the sense of fulfillment. And I think that's another thing as well to consider. It's just like, imagine you're inspired to kind of take, I don't know, like dance lessons or something. Let me see, I'm trying to think of an example here. Like imagine like if you identify as a guy, imagine if you're a guy and you're very interested in taking ballet, but you're worried about the stigma of men taking ballet. Men don't take ballet, whatever. That's that's so inappropriate. That's so not cool. That's so, some would say, gay or whatever. But these could be conversations that could be coming up in this person, right? I'm just naming an example here. I'm not projecting this out to anybody here. But it's like, but what if there's a sense of fulfillment that could come about from that opportunity, that desire, the curiosity to explore ballet, right? Like as a guy, imagine like this person thinking about it, you know. That's again, that's just hoping to give you a sense of just like how to be very aware of, at least for me, of just like you know, perfection, where I'm like idealizing and trying to create perhaps like a fantasy that's not really grounded in reality. And when it comes to, when I think about communicating my truth and my authenticity, the reality is to understand that not everybody's going to accept it with, like, oh, like they'll embrace it, like, oh, thank you, and all this. That means there's some that'll be like, what's this, or what the hell? It'll be kind of taken with a grain of salt, which is fine, which is great. I think I would, which I would rather want that than anything else. So I'm thinking about, okay, perfection, and just kind of examining how can that, how in ways that I'm actually letting that affect me in my involvement in life, and going through the steps, making mistakes, embracing them, going through all these things, giving myself the grace, forgiving myself if I've done something that didn't quite go out the right, that didn't quite go the way that I would have liked, wanted to. And maybe, if it might have hurt somebody or something, if something well intentioned but might have created some unintended consequences. Nevertheless, to just give myself the grace, you know. And I remember from the conversation when I was having, one of my friends on the podcast video, is like, talking about like giving myself the grace that in whatever moment in life, whatever stage where I was, that I was perfect for where I was at there. Meaning, like, what I want to get at is like, imagine if you made a mistake, you did something, and maybe it was probably extreme or something. Maybe it might have affected somebody, a loved one or something. And then perhaps you could think about all these scenarios where it's like, I could have done this, I should have done that. But at that time, in that moment, you were doing the best you knew how at that moment. Looking back, hindsight 2020, you can look at outside of it because you weren't involved in it. You weren't involved in the whole. So you can kind of look at and see, and kind of, there's that feedback, of course, that can be given, provided if it's the feedback to self that's done so gently, respectfully, with patience, with love. It's like we're all doing the best we know how at any given moment in time, and you know to kind of give you a sense of perfection, where I think it's the healthy way of looking at it rather than the unhealthy way, is that, a way of how I look at perfection is like in terms of like our life purpose. For example, like, for your purpose, your direction, your journey, you are perfect for it, and nobody else, because you're the best great fit for it, for your journey, because it's yours. Your journey is yours. It's not anybody else's. You can share your journey with others, and there's this co-creation that happens, but your journey, your part, is still yours. So it's something that's important to just honor that beautiful, that growth process. Again, that's far from perfect, yet it's still perfect, if that makes sense. So I say this to say that, perfection is not inherently bad per se. It really is just how one looks at it, how approaches it, and how that one's mindset about it, how that carries into their daily life. And it boils down to, is your idea of perfection, perhaps, is it serving you or is it not? That's the main difference between if it's positive or negative. Positive, it's working for you. Negative, it's actually hurting you. It's not working for you, it's working against you. And in some other ways, I look at perfection really encompasses everything. Things that we consider flaws, I think that's in the perfection. I've heard people say we're, I think it was like perfectly imperfect. Perfectly imperfect. And so, and I think that sounds sound to me for sure. And so, speaking on the part where I was talking about, it's essential while you're here on this planet in this lifetime to be involved. Where perfection has worked against me is like, okay, I'm gonna wait until these certain conditions. I'm gonna wait until once I find the perfect partner, get the perfect job, and all this, and then I'll be happy. I'll wait until all the edits I make on my Substack post, making sure every the grammar is correct and perfect, and it's everything. I need to make sure it's no errors and stuff, and then I'll be able to post it. As opposed to just as opposed to just saying, no, wait, I've made some. Let's say in the context of like what I just shared, the Substack post, because I do post on Substack periodically. I'm gonna make some edits to it. I'm gonna kind of scan it, kind of once at least, and then at that point, and just accept that it's enough. So like I think if you find yourself struggling with like, oh, it's not perfect, even like when like something if visually, like if I like symmetry and things like that, perfect has to look a certain way. For me, I always tell myself, you know what, it's perfect enough. Because like those little things as well, like when I mentioned the visuals, like when I'm organizing my room, sometimes I kind of that my perfection or like the mindset or like what I internalize, it can really show up in that way, and I start to become discontent, and I start organizing, reorganizing, and then doing all this, and then just like doing all this in this loop, and then looking at like, still doesn't look perfect, or doesn't like, it's just like it's one of those things that can really eat. It can really eat at you. I know for me, if I'm not careful, it really does. And so I really do resonate with with my with one of my colleagues when he was sharing about how like perfection, it can really affects his ability, like affects him in the way that that prevents him from sharing with people spiritually, because he's another spiritual seeker, educator, consultant, um, like myself, and that's something that I resonate as well too. Is just like, for me, part of what I get fulfillment is just sharing with people, sharing what I've put together, what I've learned, what I've gathered, with no expectation from you, the listener. You don't have to act on anything I tell you. All I ask is that if there's anything that inspires you to run with it, to sit with it, put on a mental shelf. You know, it resonates for a reason, and that's your reason. That's for you, not for me. I'm just a messenger here, and I think that's the thing. It's just like, and that's where I know it can also restrict my communications, because first of all, I want to say that all of us are messengers, messengers of God, messengers of spirit. We can channel because we're all one with all things. We're connected to everything, and part of I think for me, it's like where perfection can work against me if I start painting things like with my own personal biases or likes or dislikes and things like that. Especially like if I'm sharing with people, I can kind of, the whole being very critical of myself can really just like I've had some episodes where I've like recorded, and I'm like, I feel like that's not a very good one. But then I remind myself, like, you know what? It's not about what I think necessarily. My message is for listeners like you, so that anything that you need to hear, it's heard, it's received, and hopefully acted upon in a positive way. So it's not my business when I share, if I'm being authentic and doing the best I know how it's received and what's said, like whatever after the words leave my mouth, that's not my responsibility. Like it's not, I was gonna say, it's not my job to be so concerned or worried about what people may think. Although, of course, it's important for me, for anybody, right? When it comes to communication, be thoughtful about what you say and things like that. And of course, that's definitely important too, for sure. But it's just looking at like if the moment somebody says something, wherever those words echo and where they're received, it's up to the receiver to decide what to do with it. So, like if someone insults you, maybe it's a stranger, maybe it's a friend, maybe they make fun of your shoes, like, oh, those shoes look whack and cheap. And and perhaps you might have taken that personal, you know? But it's one of those things where it's like in that moment, you don't have to like take it personal. Maybe you have something there, perhaps that's a way to explore, like, why is this hurting me? It's like in a moment of to be aware rather than just kind of getting caught up in the emotions of like, oh shoot, this person just made fun of my shoes and stuff like that, and perhaps maybe you like those shoes and how they feel and how they look to you, and for someone to just be like, oh, this is that, understandably would feel very very bad. But there comes that point though of just like the person that listens ultimately has the power, and people can say this and that, but it doesn't have to. It can't do anything to you unless you allow it, type of thing, you know. And I'm saying this right now, as I just said all of this, it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. And so, when I look at life and things like that, and I'm looking at my life, you know, I like to see it instead of just saying, I'm not here to get it to do it perfect, to get it right. I'm here to do my best at every single step of the way. And when I look back on my past younger self, to give myself the grace for whatever it is that I did in that moment, because I was just operating, I just was doing the best I knew how at the time. And this is really, and this kind of way of like approaching it is very important in building a healthy relationship with yourself. You know, I mean, like all the things that I share spiritually, a lot of things, it's just a lot. You can always kind of trace it back to that. It's like building a healthy relationship with yourself and the things I talk about. And another thing I want to talk about in terms of like where perfection can be very negative is centered around expectations. And even, but I'll even say though, expectations, I've come to learn now at this point in time that it's actually, it's something very, there's something about it that's very neutral. Or rather, expectations also can be good or bad. Where I used to think expectations was exclusively bad, where I didn't see myself, I wasn't open to the idea that expectations can be good, you know? In some senses, like, I thought about like praying. I feel like when we offer prayers, it's almost, there's some sense of like expectation for something good to happen in the future. Some kind of wanting to influence or want a direction to go a certain way, you know? At least the way I'm thinking about it, the way in my head right now. Again, not to say that it's bad, but it's like, it's kind of setting that intention. It's like projecting your energy into the future with your intentions, like with like prayer and stuff like that. And expectations, like I can expect the best. I can expect great things. I can expect good things to come from my day, without getting so specific, but just like open ended. But at least it's like it's making some kind of a declaration, like I want this, like expecting good rather than just like, I don't know what, just whatever of my day. But it's like, why not focus on, because there's so many possibilities, on the things that build are constructive and expect more of that. When I think about it, it's like when I expect more of, it's almost like I'm like, to me, it's like I want more of. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know? Again, this, I'm just kind of playing around it here, with the idea and the mindset behind it. So it's like Perfection, expectations, they both can be positive or negative. But really, a lot of things are really neutral. But I think it's because of our own biases and our own perception. We can start painting this our likes. We can start coloring something our likes and dislikes. And that's why, like, we can always color like an experience or something. That's where I feel like where the criticism for me comes up is like I look at my past and I look at a particular moment of what I did or said, and I start painting my personal dislikes over a situation where, again, I was probably doing the best I knew how at that time, and yet I'm painting this the experience. I'm coloring it rather than purifying, and that is to say, well, what's actually the good of that moment? So it's like rather than just saying like, oh man, what's all the things that went wrong of something. How about reflecting on what went right? And and this is actually looking at it like this is the in the context of like examining your past, right? Examining your past experiences. Oftentimes we focus so much on the hole in the donut rather than the whole donut itself, if that makes any sense. I remember somebody shared that with me, and I'm just trying to use that example where basically there's that tendency we tend to just focus on the negative. We can receive so many good compliments, and then all it takes is this one person to give one either negative feedback or something maybe not so good or disrespectful that overrides all the other compliments and support from other people. You ever notice that, or can you relate with that? So tying it back to perfection, it's like if you find yourself evaluating your past or even right now in your current predicament, what if I ask myself, in what ways are things are working out perfectly for me right here, right now? What if you were to ask yourself that question and leave it as an open-ended question, putting it out to the universe, kind of a thing? What would that look like? What would that bring into your day? What would that invite more of? Just taking that shift. Because again, there's like this. I think with perfection is like there's this focus into like the flawed. Again, just like painting the ugly part. It's like forgetting that that's all part of the perfection. That's all part of the process. All of it. Perfection is like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything. You're perfect for what you've come here to do in your purpose, just as I am perfect for what I've come here to do. So it really is a matter of just that mindset and perspective. And to just take that moment of like, is this perspective I'm using, or this lens that I'm looking through, is it helping me or is it actually not? And that's a good question to kind of check yourself with. And especially examining past experiences, especially like looking into the past. I feel like I find that this is like, or even just, but then just as much in the future too, of just like expectations and things like that. And just like being reasonable, at least in that regard, with regards to the future. Like just being more reasonable. It's just expect the best without feeling bad about it. Oh, like because I used to always think that expecting something made me feel like an entitled prick, an entitled idiot. I mean, if it's used a certain, it can. If it's wielded in a certain way, sure, sure. It really depends on the situation, but again, I think it can be wielded for good, something very positive. And something else. Oh, sorry. I always forget that my mic's right here. I'm like speaking away. If at any moments, I apologize if my mouth is like if my voice is kind of changes up a little bit because like I have my mic right here and then I look another way. um, but anyway, it's all right. It's all right. No big, no big deal. But going back to perfection, I think something else too is like there's a, there's an aspect of like standard that comes up, and for me, it's like when I want something to go a certain way and stuff like that, or anything that I would just like, I don't know, label as perfect. I find myself just thinking about standards, and the question that comes up for me that I want to at least share with you because I wrote in my show notes here and I feel like it's worth sharing is like, whose standards am I taking on? You know, like, and I think an example, like, I think, like, do you want your idea of perfection to reflect society standards? Or perhaps do you want your idea, or would you rather have your ideas of perfection reflects your standard, your way of living, your own philosophy? And that felt good to share. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if it resonates with you, but it definitely it feels good to me. Just sharing that. And so that's another component I think is important. It's just like living your life your way, you're on your own terms and stuff like that, and that's perfect for you. That's best for you. That feels good and fulfilling to you. So I think you using perfect as a gauge of like perfection. Hmm. Like I'm just thinking about like if I'm okay, this opportunity is perfect for me. Like, oh, going to a bike ride with my friends on Friday night is perfect for me. When I kind of that's an example. To me, it's like using that word as a way of like to say like this is something that'll be fulfilling for me. Because again, like I think one of the big things I want to emphasize when it comes to perfection is steering clear of rights and wrongs. I mean, our society's had these rights and wrongs and stuff like that, but that don't mean it's like it's everything. If it's like the authority behind or whatever, or it shouldn't be like the standard or how you should live your life. You know, what feels right and good, perfect for you, may not be reflect the same, the same for me, and that's a good thing because we're unique. You know, maybe the idea of like riding a bike on a Friday night may not feel perfect for you. Perhaps maybe some R&R or you know binge watching some like TV shows, a really good engaging TV series or something, or a movie perhaps fits perfectly for you. You know, and then that's fine. That's great. It's like do that. Whatever, if it leads you to more fulfillment for yourself. I mean, I think that's ultimately at the end of the day the most important thing out of all of this. So, and I know for me as a content creator, I get a lot of fulfillment when I just share spiritually with people. Like I've had my fair share of my pot when I've recorded. I'm like, I don't feel as great about that podcast. Again, just like ideas of perfection and all this stuff. But then other times where I felt really good about what I shared, you know, and all of it has its place. All of it's part of my own process. And for the felt, I really truly do feel fulfilled when I'm sharing and giving of myself to you, as the listener, because I really want to help empower people. I really want to help people help themselves. And I truly believe it's important to examine it from one's own concepts, their lens, their mindset, how they approach anything. So that's why I know for me, that's why I'm dealing with my own personal challenges, making sure that if the idea of perfection starts to affect me in a way that works against me, it's like restoring it back to the way of like, nope, this is perfect. Like even this episode, I can already see like, man, I feel like this episode's kind of. I can hear all the criticisms to myself about how this particular episode is going, but it's like, but I'm like, nah, bro, no, nah, bro, it's fine the way it is. I'm not about to kind of redo the whole thing and what I did. This is perfect for the way it is. This is to kind of give you a sense of like, for example, for myself in this moment right now, living this, not just talking about it to talk about it, you know. Um, but for me, I think I'm working on is just to tap into my own courage to be able to embrace it all. Embrace wherever it is that I want to, that I'm heading towards, where I want to go, where I feel gravitated towards, and embrace everything that may come with it, and not allow myself to be dissuaded, to talk myself out of it because of ideas of perfections or other people's opinions or what I think I should be doing, all the shoulds, should, good, bad, oh, shameful, all the judgments and stuff, all the things. There's so many excuses that I can buy into to not live my best life. And so, I would want to encourage you, my friend, to just really notice and pay attention to those conversations in your heads and tune into your own motives of what you're doing. To check yourself, are my motives clear? And a part of way when I look at where my motives are clear is when I'm have a motive to do something because I know it's to my benefit and it may benefit other people in a positive way. That's like for me, it's like having that clear motives. And it's just like, and it's something where it's like it's a win-win scenario for everybody or for whomever involved, I think. So I don't know if you're a fellow content creator, might like myself, and which if you are listening to this and and you are, well, I hope any of this resonates with you, and I appreciate you tuning in to hear this content creator's journey in this whole thing. And yeah, so definitely learning to embrace everything, embrace the reality that comes with, I know for me, putting myself out there and sharing, but remembering that I get so much fulfillment from sharing with people. So it's like all the forces are telling me to like go, keep going. And yet the fear, the part that wants to keep me safe, which is understandable and valid, but it's also the part that would also want to keep me comfy. But growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It happens outside. We got to be outside of our comfort zone. We got to be out of there if you want to be able to grow. And that's part of why we're all here. We all came to this planet to learn and grow. Each and every single one of us. In my opinion, I don't care who you are, who the person, what they say they are. They can claim not, but we all came here because of this school. That's one of my guiding principles and how I carry myself and what I truly believe and know in my heart. And understanding that it's my own process, just like as much as your process is your own, to go through it, to have all the beautiful and messy successes, the beautiful messes and the successes, everything. That's what really part of I think about when it comes to like perfection. Going back to what I said about your purpose, your life purpose, you're perfect for that. Nobody else. That's how unique you are. No one can do what you chose to do, what you bring to the table. No one can do what I came here to do and what I bring to the table. And each and every single one of us is unique. There's no duplicate of anybody. We all share similarities, and that's great. That's cool. But there's not one person that's exactly like you out there in the universe. Think about that for a moment. Because I see that as a fact. And so if you find yourself feeling guided to do something, and especially if it's something that feels even a glimmer of satisfaction or fulfillment or joy, and yet there might be these excuses, these fears, these anxieties, these worries, take the chance. Because I've heard it said, regret is heavier than failure. And I would say, but but you're a soul and you're light, not heavy. Light and bright and childlike. Woohoo! And so, so yeah, this has been an interesting episode right here. Again, taking an angle at the idea of perfection, just because of just what I've been working through personally as a content creator in my own process. And I hope you got something out of it. And even if you're not a content creator, even if you're just as a creative, whatever that looks like for you when you make something, or whatever that you're working with, or whether it be people or things, I think it's applicable across the board. It doesn't really matter. It's all encompassing, just like spirituality. Everything here is spiritual. It's like it's all the means for spiritual growth. I mean, that's my hot take here. uh, but yeah, I hope you got something out of it. I hope that stirred up something, inspired something in you. Um, and if it's done, I can only on my part trust that, and I just do the best that I know how. Give myself the grace and keep on moving, keep on pushing, keep on moving towards living my best life. Just as much as I want you to do the same for yourself, my friend. Live your best life, cause you deserve it. You deserve it, okay? You deserve it. And so, this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineered. I'm your host, Alan Zapeta, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.